Afternoon. But elsewhere, as I said, some sunshine, just a scattering of showers, but still on the cool side. I don't think winds will be quite as strong as they were on Monday, but still highs below average for the time of the year. So as we head through Tuesday evening and overnight, some further outbreaks of showery rain continuing across some southeastern parts. A bit of uncertainty about the exact timing of that clearance, but we could see another pulse of heavy rain spreading in across the far southeast. Elsewhere, though, many of those showers tending to fade away as we head through the night, just one or two continuing, and again, under those clear skies, turning fairly chilly. As we start Wednesday morning then, probably a better start to the day across many southern parts compared to Tuesday morning. Some sunshine first thing, a drier start to the day across Scotland as well. Elsewhere, lots of sunshine to come, but it won't be long before further showers break out. And again, some of those could be heavy with a small chance of hail and thunder. And again, breezy around any showers, temperatures on the cool side. Quick look ahead to the rest of the week. It stays rather changeable with a mixture of sunshine and showers, but warming up, at least in the south, as we head towards Friday.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tonight on Farage, it's me, Patrick Christys. I am filling in for the big man whilst he's on a well-earned break. But coming up on the show, following a weekend of riots across France, I will ask, has multiculturalism failed, and could the same happen here on the streets of Britain? Nigel has left me with a nice little present as well, a bombshell interview with the former head of the RAF, Sir Michael Graydon, who has slammed our military resources. He gives his verdict on where we went wrong with Putin, and crucially as well, the woke disease infecting our armed forces. All of that is to come, but here's a little taste.
Is the RAF now too small?
Yes. What's going on in Ukraine at the moment technology is playing a part, but it's mass.
It's mass. Yeah, it's air superiority, it's boots on the ground.
Exactly. And if you haven't got it, you're at risk.
Look, I've seen all of that interview, and trust me, you are going to want to stay tuned to find out exactly what revelations that particular chap gave to our very own Nigel Farage right here on GB News. And we'll also have an update on the scandal of banks cancelling their own customers by closing their accounts. Yes, that's not one to be missed. But all of this comes your way. It's going to be a firecracker after the news with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Let me bring you some news we received in the last hour here on GB News. The Lord Chancellor Alice Chalk, we understand, is asking the Parole Board to reconsider its decision to allow the double child killer Colin Pitchfork to be released from prison. The Parole Board recently ruled that Pitchfork, who was jailed for life for raping and strangling two 15-year-old girls in the 1980s, can be freed. He was jailed and told to serve a minimum term of 30 years in 1988. That was later reduced to 28 years for good behaviour. Lord Chalk says it's absolutely vital that offenders are kept behind bars and says there's a chance the board's decision was made irrationally. We'll bring you more detail on that, of course, if there's any further comment. Now, in other news today, drivers paid nearly £1 billion more for their fuel at supermarket filling stations last year after the supermarkets increased their profit margins. An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority has found that drivers paid an extra 6 pence per litre for fuel. The Chancellor now supports the idea that the CMA's call for a cheapest fuel finder website could help motorists find the best and nearest fuel prices on their phones or in-car sat-navs. Nearly 4,000 migrants crossed the English Channel in June, which is the highest monthly figure for the last 5 years, pushing the total for the year so far to more than 11,000. The figure comes almost 6 months after Rishi Sunak vowed to stop the boats as one of his cabinet's chief objectives. And Downing Street insists discussions on NHS pay and conditions can't be held unless strikes are stopped. The British Medical Association, though, says doctors could continue to strike over the next few years if their demands aren't met. Junior doctors are planning 5 days of strike action from the 13th to the 18th of July, and consultants are walking out on the 20th and 21st of this month. And rail passengers are being warned of disruption too, as train drivers refuse to work overtime all this week. Services with 16 train operators will be running a limited service today until Saturday, as representatives continue to dispute their pay. ASLEF says its members at 15 train operators will take part in industrial action from the 17th to the 22nd of this month. Now, His Majesty the King has begun his first Holyrood week since his coronation. King Charles was welcomed by crowds at Kinneil House, Boyness, at Falkirk. That's the historic home of the Dukes of Hamilton. The annual tradition, also known as Royal Week, sees the monarch immersing themselves in Scottish culture and heritage. Those are your latest news headlines. You are up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, France is bracing for its 7th night of rioting, violence and vandalism, all of which allegedly is being carried out in the name of a 17-year-old boy who was unlawfully shot dead by police. Shops are being looted, political figures have nearly been assassinated, people have been battered to within an inch of their lives. Why? Well, I don't think it's really because a boy was unlawfully shot. I think it indicates that multiculturalism in Europe has failed, that integration has failed. Some may argue some groups of people never even tried. In fact, we might have been warned about this by none other than the Foreign Minister from the United Arab Emirates.
There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
I worry that we are witnessing what happens when you have rapid population growth and demographic change and people don't feel as though they have a stake in society. If you do not integrate into society, you don't mind smashing it to pieces and looting it, like what's happening in France. How many more cars have to be torched or expensive trainers have to be stolen from department stores before justice is served for that 17-year-old boy? It's not really about him, is it? 2.3 million immigrants entered the EU from non-EU countries in 2021, an increase of almost 18% compared with 2020. 23.8 million people living in the EU on the 1st of January 2022 were non-EU citizens. 10% of the French population is now Muslim. There are 4.7 million Muslims in Germany. For the first time in a census of England and Wales, less than half the population described themselves as Christian, and the Muslim population rose by 1.2 million in just 10 years. When one factors in that the latest round of net migration figures showed another 1.2 million people arrived in Britain, many of whom were from non-EU countries, and we consider what's going on in the Channel as well, it is easy to conclude that the religious and demographic change will increase rapidly. And that is the key word, rapidly. Well, why is this potentially a problem? Well, if you have huge numbers of people arriving from, say, parts of the Middle East or sub-Saharan Africa every single year, then all too often they gravitate towards their own communities. And it can create pockets within society, segregation within society, economies within the economy. They bring with them, of course, their own norms and values, and their culture may not adapt or assimilate with that of the indigenous population. There appears to be no real need to integrate. Take a little look at what happened when I walked up the Edgware Road in London earlier today.
Oh, no, I speak English.
OK, all right, no worries. Thank you very much.
From Egypt.
From Egypt. All right, take care. Bye-bye. See you soon. All right.
English.
What was that?
No speak English.
You don't speak English?
No.
Oh, OK, all right, fine. Yeah, that happened rather a lot, actually. I am concerned that we may have a France moment here soon. We had a taste of it back in 2011 when we had looting on the streets after the killing of Mark Duggan by police. I worry that we're overdue something much bigger. The UK is a tinderbox right now, ready to ignite. Or that an issue that started in another part of the world, frictions between, say, Hindu and Muslim communities originating abroad, could spill out onto the streets here. In fact, it already is happening. Just look at Leicester and Birmingham, where incidents between the two communities have resulted in violence. There are some shining examples of cultural and religious assimilation, and some great cohesive communities. Just look at our leaders. Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, is a Hindu. Our Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is a Muslim. And our England football team, of course, is incredibly diverse. But there are also clear examples that it isn't working. And so tonight, I am asking, is multiculturalism working in Britain? Get in touch, farage@gbnews.com. Well, I went out and about onto the streets of London earlier today to ask people this very question.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like, it's cosmopolitan city, and then everyone just live it together, and then there's no problem.
It's working, it's working.
Yeah?
It's the best country.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's working, the multicultural.
No, no, I speak English.
OK, all right, no worries. Thank you very much.
From Egypt.
From Egypt. All right, take care. Bye-bye. See you soon. All right.
No, it isn't. It's only concentrated in one area. Lebanese road, Bangladeshi road, you shouldn't. You should mix it up all together.
It's working very well, actually. I've been here for 32 years. I'm originally Kurdish of Iran. Came here in 1992. And at that time, it was very limited, but now it's globalizing very, very, very rapidly. Yes, it's health tourism, because a lot of the Kuwaitis mostly come to this neighborhood, to Edgware Road. They come into St. Mary's Hospital, they go to Queen Elizabeth in St. John's Wood for private hospitality, but at the same time, they experiment in different part of London.
English.
What was that?
No speak English.
You don't speak English? No. Oh, OK, all right, fine.
Learn all different stuff from all different people, way of life.
OK.
And food, ideas, everything different.
Well, joining me now to give us the facts about the ongoing situation in France, before I speak to somebody else and try to extrapolate that out and look more at the cultural side of things, is journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, who is currently in Paris. Thank you very much. It's great to have you on the show. What has the violent disorder been like in the last 24 hours, it looks utterly grim. I know they're saying that it's died down a little bit, but, I mean, there was rather a lot of it to die down, wasn't there?
Yes, quite right, Patrick. And the scary thing is that people woke up every morning to find the shops in their streets and quiet shops in quiet streets broken down, stuff stolen in a sort of random manner, when they were not woken up at 3 a.m., again, in sort of perfectly sort of nice neighborhoods, in which suddenly somebody was shaking up the door because they wanted to access whatever shop was in the courtyard or was accessible by the building door, and destroying and pillaging everything. Television, of course, has shown images of that. We now are beginning to understand that the first day, which may have been crucial to set the tone, there were severe instructions to the police not to have another incident, quote unquote, and therefore they held out and they rather than risk another killing. And the result is that there was an emboldenment of the movement by people who have no political demands whatsoever. People say these are protests in Paris. They are not protests at all. They are riots by people who essentially are out to get revenge for whatever they can express and to steal lots of stuff. Lots of the stuff that got stolen on the Champs-Élysées and elsewhere is already on sale on Vinted, for instance.
Right, so they are looting everything that they can get their hands on and then selling it to make money, which, to me, does not appear to be a particularly good way to mark the death of a 17-year-old boy at the hands of the police. It's almost like it's not really all about that, isn't it? I think. What are we seeing in terms of the police's reaction now? I thought it was fascinating what you just said there, that the police or the politicians were too afraid, initially, of having another incident that they stood back and, well, this is what you get, isn't it?
Well, that is something that we saw also at the Stade de France, and you remember the attacks against the British supporters during the World Cup. And what's really interesting, I spoke to policemen at the time, and they said we had instruction from the préfet de police, who's in charge specifically of policing in Paris, not to go away from the places we're supposed to guard, even if we saw people being attacked. And that has been existing in France for almost a quarter century. There has been an attempt to try and mitigate, if you will, to appease, and that's a loaded word in English, I know, to appease people so that the riots won't be worse. But of course the riots get worse because there's a feeling of impunity.
Look, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on at the show, right at the top of the show, to give that much-needed insight from Paris. And Elizabeth Moutet there, who is currently in Paris. Joining me now is the leader and chairman of Generation Frexit, Charles-Henri Gaulois. Thank you very, very much. What are the demographics of the people who are getting involved in this rioting and this looting and this disorder in France, and why?
Well, I think it's not something about political or social demands. What they are saying, it's most, we can say, criminals, and they are here to loot and to burn buildings. You can see that it has nothing to do with the death of the young people, and there is a case about it. Justice will pass if needed, you know. It's just a bad excuse to do that. And if you look at the video, it's striking because you can see that there is no anger. They are just laughing when they burn something, when they attack the police. So it's people that they don't feel French. They have their own culture, they have their own norms, they have their own, let's say, rules, and it's very impressioning. And you can see that Macron has not understand a clue, because you may have seen his press conference. He was saying maybe it's because of video games, because of social media, because of the young boy which is dead. But actually, he doesn't want to face his own responsibility, because when you look at it, what is this? What are these events? The name of it's mass immigration, and he has favored mass immigration as his predecessor. If you look at the numbers, it's last year 500,000 people host in France, foreigners. So of course there are many foreigners which as well integrated, but you cannot assimilate 500,000 people.
And it's the pace of it,
multicultural
Charles
society
Henry.
cannot work. It's a question of number. If you have huge numbers of immigration, you won't be able to integrate anyone. And the other issue, he doesn't want to speak about it, the lax judiciary system that we have. Because the prisons are full. Actually, you have many foreigners in it. We should expel them, but you have, for example, 11,000 people which are foreigners in a French prison. And then when you go to the court, there are two trials since from the people rioting. They have been given 3 to 4 months, so they don't go to prison. So it's total impunity. They know that they can attack police, they can burn buildings,
and then be protected. And then be protected, because then the police don't want to then stoke further racial tensions. And we see it on the streets over here. And this is why I'm talking about it so much. I had so many conversations over the weekend with a lot of people who are both involved in politics and involved in current affairs, or who are just ordinary, normal people who are worried that what we're seeing on the streets of France could well happen over here in Britain. I am worried that it is a matter of time. Would it be unfair for me to suggest, Charles Henry, that France has imported its own problems?
Of course, we have done it. You have two pieces, let's say, for immigration. There is, of course, the ideology of the French politician, but you have also the European Union, because with the Schengen area, with all the immigration rules of the EU, you cannot lower immigration numbers within the EU. You can see it with Italy. Meloni was elected. She was going to reduce immigration. She cannot reduce at all immigration within the EU. So towards immigration, within the EU, we will have anyway a huge problem. So it is a European issue. And then when you look at lax judicial system, it's a national problem. We should have built prisons. And of course, within the EU, you cannot expel as well foreigners, because within the Schengen area, you can expel them on the day after they will come back. You have no control at all of your borders. So
exactly. Look, Charles, thank you very, very much. That is the leader and chairman of Generation Frexit, Charles-Henri Gaulois. Fascinating. A couple of things that we've learned there that I think will play out on the streets of Britain, could well play out on the streets of Britain, which is that the police will be too soft because they're too afraid, that our politicians will want them to be too soft because they're too afraid. That will actually result in more violence. There will be huge numbers of people who don't feel like they've got a stake in society, who won't mind smashing it to pieces, frankly, and that we are just one incident away from seeing what's happened in the streets of France happening over here. Mark my words, we are long overdue something like that. But coming up next on Farage, I will speak to Anna Firth MP for South End West as, talking of immigration, the new Conservatives group issued a stark warning to Rishi Sunak over net migration. I hope he's listening. Because if he isn't, he will be the former Prime Minister and they will be the former group of new Conservative MPs. It's now or never for Rishi. The big question is, has he got the bottle to do what the vast majority of the British public want him to do? See you in a tick.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In just a matter of moments, Nigel Farage himself will actually be on your screens because he's done a bombshell interview with the former head of the RAF, Sir Michael Graydon. They cover all sorts. I've seen all of this interview. You will not believe it when you actually see it. How unprepared our RAF is, but also a damning indictment of how the big woke disease has infected our armed forces. That is coming your way very, very shortly. Nigel Farage's interview with the former head of the RAF. But in the meantime, Rishi Sunak is facing pressure from MPs within his own party now to crack down on legal immigration. 25 MPs from the 2017-19 intake have formed the New Conservatives in a bid to reduce migration figures by more than 80,000. The group are suggesting to close temporary visa schemes for care workers in a bid to reduce migration figures. Yep, that's fine. But they're also talking about putting a cap on the amount of refugees who resettle to 20,000. So once we've hit that cap, people like the Archbishop of Canterbury can't keep banging on at us to throw our arms around the world and accept every Tom, Dick and Harry from every single part of Africa and the Middle East. They say the proposed measures would reduce net migration by, get this, 400,000. And, crucially, and this shouldn't be too much to ask, should it? Just meet the 2019 manifesto pledge. You know that thing that loads of people voted for? Yeah, that's all they want. Just meet that pledge. Anna Firth joins me now, Tory MP for South and West, and is part of the New Conservatives. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Great to have you on the show. The key thing that stood out for me about what you guys want, which I think is brilliant, is a report to be published alongside just the immigration figures in terms of jobs. You want it to be published as well in terms of the impact on our public services and our infrastructure. And it is about time, I think, that the British public were able to look at immigration like that in the round.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very simple thing, in essence. I represent the new city of Southend-on-Sea, and the levels of net immigration that we have had this year is equivalent to taking on board 2 whole new cities of Southend-on-Sea. Yet that is not sustainable, and that is not what the British people voted for in 2019. So clearly, as a party, we have got to have a big, open and honest conversation about how we're going to deal with this. And that's what this report is all about. It is absolutely not about challenging the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister is doing a fantastic job. The illegal migration bill is hopefully will pass.
With respect, Anna, just to say, sorry, but with respect, Anna, if you honestly thought he was doing a fantastic job, you would not have formed a group called the New Conservatives and launched a 12-point plan, which you've gone very public about and want to put to the nation so that he does it.
I don't agree with that, actually, because the Prime Minister is focusing on stopping the boats. He is focusing on stopping illegal migration. He has got a massive in-tray, probably the most difficult in-tray, in the Western world to deal with. What we are doing is rowing in behind him and having a good, solid look at legal migration, which is also, at the moment, far too high.
The numbers of illegal entrants across the Channel in June were the highest since records began, though. So if he is focusing on that, then really it's not going that well, is it?
Well, I don't agree with that. The returns policy that we have done with Albania, we think has prevented a huge number of crossings and reduced those Albanian crossings down to very, very small numbers from thousands. So that is one bit of a solid progress. Yes, we've had a setback last week in the Court of Appeal, but that is obviously being appealed again to the Supreme Court, which would have happened anyway. Arguably, this will now happen quicker because the government is in control of that appeal. And of course, there was a very strong dissenting judgment, which I've read from the Lord Chief Justice.
OK, all right, fair enough. When it comes to this particular 12-point plan, though, is the problem that there aren't enough Conservative MPs who are actually Conservative? All you are asking them to do is enact a very clear set of priorities, such as that only 5% of social housing stock should go to people who are non-British. This is stuff that you shouldn't be having to force a Conservative Prime Minister or a Conservative Party to do, and yet you are.
Well, I don't agree with your language that we're trying to force things. The job of backbenchers is to respond to our constituents. And my constituents in Southend-on-Sea are concerned about levels of immigration, both illegal, that we've already discussed, and legal. So it's my job as their representative to look at all possible solutions. And this paper is a very, very good starting point. You know, this isn't a white paper. This isn't a government paper. This is a policy paper of suggestions, which I think are very sensible. So just taking the first one, care workers, the temporary care worker scheme concocted during COVID was supposed to bring in around 6,000 people. It's brought in 80,000 people, depressing the wages for care work. I think that's a scandal, and that is something we absolutely have to grip.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thank you very much, Anna. Great to have you on. I mean, look, for what it's worth, this is the thing. I think that these are all sound ideas. The problem that I've got, and OK, you might have an issue with my language there with the word force, but I mean, my issue was the fact that this wasn't just policy anyway. I mean, it's things that if you just go and put it to the people, if you put their 12-point plan to the people, you would see it getting voted for time and time again. It is what the vast majority of British people actually seriously want to happen. That was Anna Firth, their Conservative MP. Now, next, we have got a big, exclusive bombshell interview with Sir Michael Graydon, the former head of the RAF, in which he drops some serious truth bombs on the powers that be over defence spending and how we dealt with Putin, but also, as well, the big woke recruitment drive. Nigel Farage did the interview, so Nigel will be on your screens in just a couple of moments. But here's what he said when Nigel asked him about that last point, about the woke stuff.
Yes, it's a good thing to have some diversity in there, but to try to mirror it to the population and, as it were, adjust, manipulate, if you like, the figures to get it, that is quite wrong. And we have to continue to go in the military for the best people, regardless.
Well, he doesn't hold back, and neither does Nigel. Make sure that you keep yourselves locked in right here on GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, for those of you missing Nigel Farage, you are in luck because he has left me with quite the gift. Last week, he sat down with Sir Michael Graydon, the former Chief of the Air Staff. That's the head of the RAF, to you and me. The interview took place at the Royal Air Force Museum, London, where Sir Michael warned that this country was underfunding its military, our Air Force is under-resourced, and he slammed the controversial woke recruitment policy. Take a look and a listen to Nigel's special interview. Defending Britain, are we flying towards a disaster?
So, Michael, we've got a war happening on the doorsteps of Europe. We've got China resurgent, making quite bellicose noises about Taiwan. Is this the biggest threat level we've faced since the Cold War?
Yes, I think we've been facing it actually for quite a long time. You just haven't been prepared to recognise it. But, you could go back to 2010 comfortably and see the direction of travel of Russia. China, perhaps not at that time. It's taken a bit longer for it to get round. But I've been disappointed to see the expansionist approach of China. I rather thought she would want to consolidate and be a great economic power, which she is. But the move into the military field worries me. So yes, you're right. This is a bad time.
We've been committed to wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya. I mean, arguably, we've been busier, our service has been busier in the last 20 years than they were in the previous half a century. And yet, the national debate, and particularly at general elections, when it comes round to defence seems to have moved down to the bottom of the pile.
I think that's probably right. I mean, a lot of people try hard to bring it up, and there's some very good commentators, both on the radio, television, and in the press, to do it. It doesn't seem to catch the imagination, shall we say, of the politicians who've got the obvious issues of, getting re-elected, and what's going to re-elect them. It's probably not defence.
I mean, obviously, spending is always a very, very big issue. I mean, at the time that you were, Chief of the Air Staff, and we're going back almost exactly 30 years, we were spending a lot more money on our military then than we are today. We've been spending under 2% of our GDP for most of the last few years. We're now at 2.2%, but some say we've included lots of ceremonial duties in that. Are we spending too little money on defence?
Yes. And I think a lot of people have begun to recognise it. I mean, a number of politicians have said we should be spending 3%. Given the circumstances, it's hard to say. How can you possibly, when you've carried out reviews, when things around, you've discussed Georgia, you've discussed Crimea, and all the rest of it, how is it that you can continue to address that problem, which is a problem, let's face it, to our security, to our freedom?
Now we're talking about Ukraine potentially being fast-tracked as a member of NATO, and it would seem that political voices everywhere are saying that somehow this might be a good idea. What is your view?
It's a very difficult one. I mean, I go back to my time in the mid-90s when I think we missed a chance to make Russia more user-friendly. As a result of that, we got Putin. And Putin probably came in with a view because he was KGB and very unhappy with what had happened before. But I just wonder if we'd been a little bit more accommodating to Russia, brought her into other arrangements and as a good person, whether we would be facing what we are today. I don't know, but I think we missed an opportunity.
When President Zelensky speaks, he seems to be speaking on behalf of all of us. And he says that retaking Crimea is one of his top priorities. But he insists all the time there should be no negotiations. Why does nobody talk about peace? Is it too early?
Probably. I mean, I think at the moment we have to see how that offensive goes and all the rest of it. It's always better to be talking about peace when you're winning than when you're losing. I'm not saying they're losing, but you know, at the moment it's uncertain which way it's going, isn't it?
We're coming up for a new boss of NATO later this year, and the Americans have effectively vetoed the appointment of Ben Wallace. And I'm wondering about this. I thought, well, of course it's, I would say this obviously, but it's because Biden doesn't like the Brits. But is it that maybe they're not taking us seriously anymore?
I think it was 8 years ago, something like that. Stanley McChrystal, you remember him? Yep. Very, very bright general, American general. Said something when the size of the British Army was on its way down and the other armed services as well. He said something like, you reach a point when you just don't get consulted anymore on the big decisions. And he was an admirer of the Brits. But what he was saying was, when your armed forces are down at that level, why should you be consulted? Because what are you actually bringing to the table? And a difficult one for you, but coming out of the EU and our presence in the EU has lost, you know, America dials Europe, who does she speak to? She used to speak to us. She doesn't any longer because we're not in Europe.
And we don't talk quite enough about the Royal Air Force and what's happening to that. So, Air Chief Marshal Sir Michael Graydon, is the RAF now too small?
Yes. I mean, you can't look at what has happened over the last 13 years and be steadily whittling down the numbers, the mass of the service, and not reach a point when actually it's too low. And I'm just reading today the very good lecture given by the head of the army, Patrick Saunders, who said mass is important. And people like me and others in the Royal Navy and the Army have been talking about mass. It's very easy to say, no, you don't need mass. Technology has taken over from it. I say, no, sorry, just look at history. You need mass. I mean, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment? Technology is playing a part, but it's mass.
But it's mass. Yeah, it's air superiority, it's boots on the ground.
Exactly. And if you haven't got it, you're at risk.
Pilots, we're told, good for, I mean, firstly, there's a recruitment process, which has gone, I think woke is the word, that it's the RAF want to choose pilots on the basis of diversity as opposed to ability. Is that right? Is that really happening?
Well, there was a big chat about it, wasn't there, on thing. I mean, I don't know precisely what was said or what was implied and where there were sort of misunderstandings and all of that. But I think I'm absolutely clear, and I think the Air Force has perhaps subsequently been absolutely clear that it must be on merit. I mean, this problem of getting diversity, getting both female and the minorities into the armed services has been with us ever since I can remember. I mean, once upon a time in the National Service, we had they were all over the place. Not so much the women, obviously, but the men.
Yep.
And it all worked perfectly well, in my view. So, yes, it's a good thing to have some diversity in there, but to try to mirror it to the population and, as it were, adjust, manipulate, if you like, the figures to get it, that is quite wrong. And we have to continue to go in the military for the best people, regardless.
Regardless. And pilots leaving the Royal Air Force. It's said that there are more qualified pilots than there are planes, and people who've trained hard and want to do this job leaving, taking better jobs in commercial aviation. It sounds like there's a big morale problem in the RAF.
Well, I talked about operational tempo. And if you've got people away from home, the amount they are, I think the same in the helicopter force as it is in the Typhoon force. I don't think it's just confined to the Royal Air Force either. I think the Royal Navy face it away from home an awful lot as well. And yes, add into it the problems that have been with infrastructure on the stations, the married quarters, which you'll have seen the stories about the married quarters and whatever. I mean, if you've got your partner, wife or whatever at home and the water's dripping down the walls, they're not going to be very happy when you come back having been away for 6 months or whatever.
The whole thing's in decline, isn't it?
Well, it is. And unfortunately, when you go around stations today, and I do, they look tired. They look very tired. And I think that all adds to, the guys and the girls give great service, and they'll spend a certain time in the service. But after they've had 10 or 12 years of that, they're probably saying, I don't think I want to stay much longer. We've got to get back to a time when they want to make a career in the service, and there are various ways that can be done. But it will take people to really confront the problem.
Prioritisation is always difficult. We touched on the carriers earlier, the sheer number of aeroplanes we've put on the carriers. Are the carriers vital for the UK's security, or a giant vanity project?
Well, one of the things that I thought we would talk about was global Britain. I think this is, frankly, a great delusion. If you want to be a great power, or if you want to be global Britain and be able to reach into these things, you've got to have certain things. An ally is only as good as the power that it can bring in support of an ally. It's not down to our economy, it's not down to our diplomats play a part in it, but the bottom line has always been that we were pretty good at the military bit. We worked alongside very successfully. That's what it's about. And don't pretend that just by saying global Britain that we're up in that league.
If we're not a fully respected member of NATO in the way we used to be, then global Britain is a fantasy. But we have to turn this around and stop decline.
We have to. We really have, because for the reasons that you've touched on, it's been in decline for a long time.
Thank you, Sir Michael, for being so frank.
Pleasure.
Really startling revelations there. That full 21-minute Defending Britain, Are We Flying Towards a Disaster interview is available on our YouTube channel. But get a load of this. We will have an update on the scandal of Nigel's bank cancelling his account with none other than Toby Young, who has also been representing many victims of this, and indeed the victim of woke culture within our armed forces. A chap who says he was forced out after 14 years of unblemished service. Why? Well, because he says that men can't be women. And I will talk to cricket lover Jacob Rees-Mogg on the Johnny Bairstow dismissal route from the Ashes. Has the Anglo-Australian relationship ever been worse? Well, I'm not sure about that. But the same old Aussies, always cheating.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, it's more from Nigel Farage now because he's announced that he was having his bank account closed whilst being given no explanation as to why. I'm sure that you have seen and heard all about this. But since then, one by one, people have come forward saying that they too have had their accounts closed, stating that it is due to them having, quote, controversial views. Well, following these outrageous revelations, banks are set to be told by the Treasury that they must protect free speech, whilst Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is understood to be deeply concerned with the behaviour of some banks. Well, in the Commons today, MP for Holton Price and Howden David Davies raised the issue of bank account closures and specifically spoke about Nigel Farage. But the breaking news is this. Nigel has just tweeted that he's been rejected by a 9th bank. He said this: just to keep people up to date, I have just had the 9th bank rejection confirmed. Maybe I need to go to law and fight this for the sake of so many people. I don't want to live in communist China. Yeah, that's right. He has just tweeted he's been rejected by a 9th bank. Joining me to discuss this right now is General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. It's Toby Young. Let's start with that breaking news. Nigel rejected by a 9th bank. What the flipping heck is happening?
Yeah, well, that's horrifying and shows just what a huge problem this is. And it's a creeping problem. It happened to me 9 months ago. I was debanked by PayPal. My 2 organisations I run were shut down. I kicked up a huge stink. They eventually restored my accounts. But since then, lots of people have been contacting the Free Speech Union to tell me that it's happened to them, asking for our help. And we've been lobbying the Treasury, lobbying the government to do something about it, to change the financial regulations, to make it much, much harder, if not impossible, for banks to do this to their customers. And we heard today, Jeremy Hunt said, Rishi Sunak's backed him up, that banks shouldn't be interfering with their customers' freedom of expression in this way. The lawful right to free speech, to exercise your right to free speech within the law, is an important part of the British tradition of liberty, and banks are frankly riding roughshod over it by removing the accounts of customers and refusing to give accounts to customers whose political views they disapprove of. Now, we don't know if that's exactly what's happened in Nigel's case, but we know of
Well, we're going to find out.
Hundreds of people that has happened.
We're going to find out, because if I was that particular bank, I would be absolutely bricking it, because these subject access requests are going to reveal, one would imagine, the reality of this. And it won't just be Nigel. And one of the key reasons we've got you on, aside from the fact that we just like you here, is that there are loads of other examples, and you go into bat for these people. Can you just give us a few of them to show how widespread this issue really is?
Yeah, well, we had a guy that contacted me a few weeks ago who only discovered that his bank account had been closed. He'd been debanked when he went to pay for his groceries in a supermarket. And under the current regulations, banks are supposed to give you at least 60 days' notice before closing your account. And they're supposed to give you an adequate explanation too. In this case, they'd given this guy no notice at all. They just closed his account without even notifying.
And this is just a normal guy, your average Joe, really?
An average Joe, yeah. We don't know exactly what he'd said to upset the bank. And one of the ways in which they're able to get away with this is, at the moment, they just don't tell you. I mean, this is a point that Nigel made. When he was told by his bank he'd been with since 1980, so for 43 years, they didn't really tell him. They just said, for commercial reasons, we're closing your account, without going into any more detail. And that makes it quite hard to sue. I mean, under the Equality Act, you can sue a bank, you can sue a business for discriminating against you on the basis of your lawful, protected beliefs. But if they won't tell you why they've debanked you, then it's quite hard to bring a case against them. And one of the ways we think the government is going to change the regulations is they're going to insist that banks really do have to provide you with a detailed explanation of why they've closed your account. And they're also, I think, going to add another regulation saying you cannot just close an account because you disapprove of a customer's political views. And that combination, forbidding the debanking for purely political reasons, as well as the insistence you have to give a decent explanation, will enable customers who this happens to sue banks in the court, and hopefully that'll rein them in.
And I wanted you to give that example there of the average Joe on the street, as it were, because if it can happen to Nigel, that's one thing, and he can lawyer up maybe, and he's got this fantastic platform here, and he's got his social media following, but your ordinary man or woman on the street, this can happen to you. But we're very pressed for time, and I want to talk to you about this other issue, which is it's not just banks that are cancelling people. There's a chap who, after 14 years, I believe, of an unblemished service, including at least 2 tours of Afghanistan, I think, you were representing him because he feels forced out of the military because he thinks that men can't be women.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary case, Patrick. So Colonel Dr. Kelvin Wright, who, as you say, served in Afghanistan, he's an army medic. He put his own life on the line on countless occasions to defend the lives, to protect the lives, to save the lives of wounded soldiers. You know, flew in helicopters over enemy territory, risked being shot down to save the lives of wounded soldiers in the field. I mean, a copper-bottomed hero. Earlier this year, I think, he reposted on Facebook something that the gender-critical feminist Helen Joyce had said, something to the effect of, if women can't say that they don't think trans women are women in the public square, then we've got a problem with women's rights in this country. Someone complained, and then he was placed under investigation, partly because he had supposedly breached the Army's transgender inclusion policy. So someone had complained, saying, this is trans-exclusionary. You can't use this language as a serving member of the Army Reserve. And he felt he had no choice because he'd been placed under investigation for saying something he thought was a perfectly anodyne, acceptable thing to say, defending women's rights. That's what the British Army is supposed to be doing. Women's rights are human rights. The British Army is supposed to be defending human rights, not attacking people for defending them. Anyway, he felt he had no choice but to resign, and we're now exploring remedies with him. He's a member of the Free Speech Union, and we're happy to defend him.
Great stuff. Look, thank you very much, Toby. Great stuff. All right, of course, that's Toby Young there. Now, look, we've launched a petition to prevent a cashless society. Go to our website, gbnews.com, or have a look at that QR code right there. Jacob Rees-Mogg follows me very shortly. Don't you dare move.
Hello, many of us saw some fairly heavy showers on Monday, and it stays rather changeable as we head through the next few days. Staying on the cool side, yes, there will be some sunshine, but also further showers to come. If we look at the pressure pattern then, low pressure hasn't really moved anywhere far, still centred towards the northeast of the country, and you can see here some fairly tightly packed isobars as well. That's what's keeping things fairly windy, and these weather fronts here, that's what's bringing some more organised showery outbreaks of rain. Now, that first band of rain is affecting much of Scotland through the evening and overnight, slowly pushing its way southwards, but some fairly heavy rain on that, and breezy as well. Clear across the central areas of England, Wales, Northern Ireland, but to the south, another band of showery rain will spread in across southern counties of England and Wales as we head through the night. Temperatures in any clear spells will turn fairly chilly. Now, we got to a fairly bright start across this central slice, like I said, on Tuesday morning, but further outbreaks of rain continue to slowly spread its way southwards across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, and quite a wet picture across parts of the south as we start Tuesday morning. Some further heavy rain to come, particularly across southeastern areas as we head through into the afternoon. But elsewhere, as I said, some sunshine, just a scattering of showers, but still on the cool side. I don't think winds will be quite as strong as they were on Monday, but still highs below average for the time of the year. So as we head through Tuesday evening and overnight, some further outbreaks of showery rain continuing across some southeastern parts. A bit of uncertainty about the exact timing of that clearance, but we can see another pulse of heavy rain spreading in across the far southeast. Elsewhere, though, many of those showers tending to fade away as we head through the night, just one or two continuing, and again, under those clear skies, turning fairly chilly. As we start Wednesday morning then, probably a better start to the day across many southern parts compared to Tuesday morning. Some sunshine first thing, a drier start to the day across Scotland as well. Elsewhere, lots of sunshine to come, but it won't be long before further showers break out. And again, some of those could be heavy with a small chance of hail and thunder. And again, breezy around any showers, temperatures on the cool side. Quick look ahead to the rest